Hey neighbors, the handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company. The Bill Allan here with the Bill Allan and Bill Allan World. The spirits are restless. It's time to rise and roll.
Spooky time, rise and roll. All right, Brian.
Yes.
This is exciting because it's not quite Halloween.
But it's close.
It's very close. So we're going to look at some stuff that is very enticing.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about storytelling in myriad forms.
Okay.
Including tying into how to bring out a little bit of the horror element
Sure.
in your role-playing games. And we'll discuss whether that is just going to be about the fantasy genre, or maybe we'll expand it
Okay.
on our table topics. But before we get into table topics, and before we even get into Kickstarters, Brian, what did you do this weekend? Because let me tell you what I did. I worked on the basement.
Mm-hmm.
I went shopping for furniture.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I got to work in the kids' haunted house.
Mm-hmm.
That was the sum total of my
Sure.
epic weekend.
What did I do? I don't know. We went to a Halloween party. We went to a coffee convention.
Coffee
where
con.
Yeah, Chicago Coffee Con, which was actually in Warrenville.
Mm-hmm.
Where we won a pretty neat brewer in the raffle, so we'll be able
Nice.
to expand our mobile programming to hot coffee as well here pretty soon.
Hot coffee.
Hot coffee.
Let me just, for our ASMR viewers. Hot coffee.
Nobody likes that, Bill.
No?
No.
Okay.
No, it was a good weekend. It was a cool event. We won a cool thing.
Yeah. So what is a coffee? Is it just like a giant tasting? You just go around to
More
different
or less.
coffee
So there's a
places
lot of roasters in the Chicago area. So, and there were a few from Wisconsin too. I think there were something like 22 roasters there, like just giving samples of their product.
Nice.
Different like coffee tie-ins. There was like Joe Snow is a syrup company, so they were there. There was a chocolate company there. There was like
Were there like acoustic singer-songwriter combos that were playing music while like
no,
coffee
there was kind
house?
of an annoying DJ that had his music too loud for the space because there was no like sound dampener anywhere.
Yes.
But there was like Imperfect Produce was there. Just like
So things related to the
tie-ins.
entire coffee
yeah,
vibe.
different tie-ins, and then they had like seminar style classes. So like, here's how you do a pour over. Here's how you use a Chemex. Here's a featured thing on latte art. Here's
So it's really like anybody who's even into coffee, like
Yeah,
just
so-
any coffee aficionados. If
Yeah,
I wanted
yeah,
to know how to
so-
make my own cold brew at home, I could do that. Or
yeah. So that event is mostly aimed toward consumers. As opposed, there's one at Navy Pier that's aimed toward like producers and vendors.
Yes.
But the one out in Warrenville is definitely aimed at like people who enjoy coffee rather than like.
And you know
companies
what?
providing it.
That is a form of nerd, people.
Yeah,
it is.
absolutely.
And our show is about all things geek and nerd. So, you know, if you're a coffee nerd, that's kind of that's your maybe not your Gen Con, but your smaller con of
Yeah, it's
cons.
like your Mighty Con.
Mighty Con.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about cons too later in the show.
Yeah.
Don't forget. All right, so let's talk Kickstarters. So I did the usual search, and I come across things that are happening now.
All right.
And I go to Invisible Sun. Now, Brian, for those who don't know, one of our great friends who is currently tuned into the live stream on Twitch. So if you're watching this later on YouTube, Danny invited us to participate in kind of an experimental test run of Monte Cook's Invisible Sun. And the reason why it was experimental is because the Kickstarter that Danny had pledged or backed had not yet arrived, right? Like the big.
Yeah,
so
it
we
got delayed like a year and a half.
Right.
Past when the ship date was initially advertised.
right. So
Which is uncommon for Monte Cook games, by the way.
yes.
I want to make that very clear. If you were in on the first set of Invisible Sun and think that oh, Monte Cook Games takes forever to get their stuff together. That was the first time that they were late on a ship date. So
Right.
but they were very late on the ship date. So it's half a one, I guess.
But it was kind of a it was kind of a thing in the world of tabletop games. Like this, I don't know. There's always new games coming out, right? But there was something about Invisible Sun that had this allure and like all this, like there's just this buzz going on around about it because it was so different, I guess.
Part of that is the fact that it's a very surrealist, almost like fever dream Final Fantasy game rather than like a typical fantasy game. The other part is it's Monte Cook, and Monte Cook has a reputation of putting out good games. He spent years working for Wizards. He's responsible for like Book of Vile Darkness and that kind of stuff.
And then what's the other one that he did? Numenera
is the other system he did. Numenera is wildly popular too, but he's got the name recognition to put out pretty much whatever he wants, and generally he follows up and gets it out on time, and people are excited about it.
So to me, it was an interesting exploration because I was like trying to find out about this game, as Danny had invited us. And I was trying to find out about this game, and like it was almost like a weird like Illuminati thing where like people weren't sharing secrets, or you had to be like a member of the certain group to find out more, and it was like which made it a little more enticing for a person like me.
So like there's like circles in the game where you have to like rank up through the circles, I guess. I don't know. We didn't get a ton of opportunity to play, right? Schedules came up, whatever. But my understanding is there's different like circles. There's like 7 circles or so that you have to like get through. And it was cool to see people kind of like building the game mechanics and the narrative around it into their communication about the game. You know what I mean? Like it really like made the game more of a meta game.
Yes.
In a game that's built around the notion of like you're playing a character who has left the real world to go to this other world. It was a nice like parallel to kind of like latch onto.
And I think the other thing that intrigued me was the tie-in between, and you had mentioned this earlier, like with the surrealist kind of element. And there's a lot of like inspiration art.
Sure.
Like, so I would see, in some of these groups, people would just share inspiration art. And it was always kind of this cool, I don't want to say fantasy, but fantastical kind of surreal art. And obviously Danny being an artist.
Fantasy in terms of...
Right, fantasy, not like sword and sorcery.
But not like the genre fantasy, but like the art style fantasy.
Right, and actually mixing a lot of genres, So anyway, so we test out this game a little bit. We play a little bit. We do go through the ropes.
It's fun,
and it was, and now Monte Cook is doing a reprint of the radical, ambitious, critically acclaimed tabletop role-playing game, currently sold out and unavailable, because like you and Danny had said. Here, Danny's chiming in. So prior to physical items being fulfilled, there were almost no resources out there to get a game going. No rules, character sheets, etc. until after the game we'd played. So my version of the game was definitely not reflective of what Invisible Sun reality is. Yes. So, but at the same time, it was enticing enough for us to want to play it, right? Like, we didn't have, as Danny mentioned, like we didn't have rule sets or anything, but we definitely wanted to check this out. So now basically Monte Cook Games is putting this out through Kickstarter. Dave, we can go to the full screen. And here's the video, Brian, that they have up here. Cool. So through Kickstarter. Dave, we can go to the full screen. Here's the video, Brian, that they have up here. So, Dave, we can go Well, Brian. So we have 18 days left to go with this reboot of their Kickstarter.
It's 104% funded.
Yes. And what's kind of crazy is, for something with 500 backers, you'd think they'd be like some of the other Kickstarters we've looked at where they're 600% funded, but they're not. Like, they barely just did it,
Right.
Now, is that because the big black box costs a lot of money to make?
Probably.
It's more than just a book. I mean, it's whole
3
freaking
books
box,
and,
right?
Like, you get a lot with that box, and it's not cheap, right? Like, the black box is, what,
Yeah.
$400?
So, Dave, if you cut
250.
back real quick to my screen, I mean, that's a lot of stuff, dude. Like, there's, and again, is it gimmicky? Like, so I don't know. I'm on the fence. Part of me is like, maybe this is just kind of gimmicky because it has all these kind of esoteric occult things. Like, if I made a game where you're like, here's the Ouija board that goes with it and the bone skull dice, and you know what I mean? Some nerd's going to buy it just because it sounds like badass. But I don't know. Like,
I guess they adds to the table, right? Like, the rule like, there's books there that are rule books for the game.
There's something of everything.
And it lays out. It looks like that black board in the middle.
Yeah.
Lays out like the different suns.
Yeah.
Which, if there's anything confusing about the game, it's like the transportation aspect. Like, understanding the setting is pretty important to the game, and so it's a pretty cool way to like lay that out visually for your players.
Right. And Danny just pointed out that a lot of the people who bought into this. The first one funded like crazy fast because these are all kind of leftover people who couldn't get in. So fair enough. I mean, they succeeded. They achieved their goal.
Yeah.
They're at 103,000 and of a 99,999 goal. So that's pretty damn good. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. So the pledge level, just to get the box, where is it? Invoke the Black Cube. $243. I summon the infamous Black Cube from the void. I receive 1 copy of Invisible Sun game. Hot damn, dude. $243 is just that's a lot. That's a lot of money. That's
what is this next one down? Traffic with
the Black Cube for retailers only.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
3 copies of it.
3 copies of it, right? And then it keeps going. Direct the steps of my destiny. Directed campaign, which includes 12 months of material handouts and secret packages. That's a buy-in. That's a big buy-in, dude. Now, I mean, I guess when you think about it, in theory, Invisible Sun could be whatever you want it to be.
Right.
So if you had this approach where you're like, I don't know, I'm just gonna use this as the base system for all my gaming, then I won't have to buy any other games. Then it's not bad, I guess.
mean, the other
to
thing is
spend that
like
much
to
money.
get all in for D&D at this point. You know what I mean? For 5th edition,
Yeah.
there's 8 seasons worth of books, 2 per some of them. There's 10 hardbook adventures and 5 rule supplements.
Mhm.
Like, you're looking at 15 books
Yeah.
at $50 a pop. So we're
Right.
looking at $750 to get all in on D&D.
Yep.
I think like the problem is it's all at once, right? Like, and here's the thing: is Monte Cook, because he has such a reputation, has always had a higher price point set to his time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he can command that price point because people pay it, right? Like, it doesn't do him any good to undersell himself. It's a little bit like when you talk to an artist and they're like, "Oh, well, this artwork is this much. I have to consider my time." Like if you have a master, like an MFA in art, you're not going to do hourly art for $15 an hour. You have to charge a premium because otherwise you're devaluing MFAs, period, right?
Right.
So I get it. It's pricey, but I get it. I don't know what the price point was on the first print.
So Danny just responded. I'll read that to you. Good timing. To put it in perspective, I paid just about $550 for mine, which is the cube, extra kits for players like cards and all that, multiple sets, and then additional campaign material that comes out over time, more hardcovers, directed campaign, etc. So it really is like, and that's kind of what I thought is you're getting a long-term buy-in to this game, which makes sense from the game publisher's perspective, because then people paid money, they want to play this game, and as long as you feed the beast,
right,
you know.
And you get all that money up front, right? Like, you don't have to fund as you go,
right.
Like, if they're buying like the full package, it means that they're paid in for the year or 2 years or however long, and you can just spend your time publishing and not spend your time.
And this method is direct, so it's not like Monte Cook Games printed 20,000 copies of this and then found out it was too expensive and no one was buying it, and now they're stuck eating the cost. That's yet another.
That's the
thought
benefit
to
of Kickstarter, is you can really take risks because there's no, like, if you don't leverage yourself before the Kickstarter, like if you wait for the Kickstarter to fill before you leverage your resources, there's not a lot of risk involved, right? Like, if it doesn't fill, it doesn't fill, and you don't have to put money into producing this product.
Right.
If it fills, great, you know.
Yeah.
But you end up not having to like leverage a mortgage to put together a product that you think will sell and then doesn't.
Right.
It also bypasses, you know, and I have mixed feelings about this, but it bypasses the retailers and lets Monte Cook be directly interacting with the people playing his game, which is nice.
In a sense, I mean, but they did have that pledge level where retailers could buy some.
Sure.
So you could have some really
and
successful...
that was a discounted price for retailers, right? So it was 3 copies for $100 more than one.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty substantial...
which is encouraging
room for a markup.
To our friendly local game stores who want to maybe get a few copies in there, knowing that, you know, they're going to have some buyers. So Brian, to go to the opposite side of the spectrum, we have yet another Kickstarter for minis, because minis are heroin.
Retailers can purchase copies, and they can also get discounted copies through Game Trade Magazine. Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're a retailer and you want to get a hold of this, Game Trade Magazine is the way to go.
Yes. All right. So the next one is Militia Miniatures, the bad guys. At least 50 new bad guys for your mercenaries to take on, all with a Hollywood twist. So this has 12 days to go. They have 60 backers. They have a goal of $3,850, and they're at $3,500, so they're pretty close. What I liked about these is this is not just like the STL files to 3D print your own. So for the 26 people who are right now live on Twitch following us, wow, that's so meta. So I'm going to hop over to this, and you're going to see the pledge level. So basically they have all these different sets of 10, right? So a pack, there are 10 different packs with 5 figures each, right? So at the bottom, you can choose to pledge 1 pack for £8, which is whatever, like 10, let's say it's $10. Yeah. Choose 1 pack. Keep going. So here, if you're Dave, are you on the screen so you can see? Yeah. So here's the figures. So we have cartel soldiers, different packs of cartel soldiers with different poses, African insurgents. We have Republican Guard. We have Militia Miniatures Rioters, Pack A, Survivalists Pack A and Pack B. Then they've got some stretch goals, like they've got leaders, robots. So they had successfully done in their first Kickstarter mercenaries, which was a successful buy-in too. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, again, kind of to pick the niche, you know, how much of the modern minis are out there? The big lines, not a lot. But so for £75, let's say about $96. Oh, they have little conversion there. You could get 10 packs. So that's 50 figures for $100. So it's $2 a pop, which is cheaper than Reaper, cheaper than Nolger's Miniatures, And you get, I mean, for 50 figures, dude, you get the whole lot.
Yeah.
Now, you could use this for modern role-playing games. You could use this in Shadowrun. You could use it in White Wolf. You could use it in a post-apocalyptic setting. You know, kind of the skies are the limit with this, is my opinion. But what's your hold-up? Because I see you made the face of uncertainty.
It just seems a little racist, I guess. Like, because this is like the villains pack, and it's like Mexican drug cartel,
Yep.
African insurgents,
Yep.
Middle Eastern
Republican Guard. Yeah.
Like,
Well, but the rioters, you know, those.
yeah, but that's
To
still,
me, those
like,
look like guys that we hang out with. That could be
I
Chris
guess,
and Joe.
Maybe. Like, I think when people talk about rioters, they have specific people in mind. Otherwise, they don't use the word rioters.
Yeah.
It just seems a little racist. Like, it seems like the
European rioters.
Sure. Okay. They put an adjective in to make it less.
Wait, American survivalists.
Oh, maybe.
Brewing up moonshine in the wilderness or directing tourists down the wrong road. We certainly wouldn't trust these folks. Look, Brian, that kind of looks like you.
It looks
seems
like
very
you
with an
tropey.
M16.
It seems very tropey. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, boy. Look, actually, that's you.
Okay.
That's like, that guy's kind of like maybe me. There's Brian right there. You got an M16.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it just.
All right, so
it just seems very.
It didn't
like,
even cross my mind, but
Yeah.
you're right. Now that I'm looking at it, it's kind of.
Like. Yeah.
Yeah. Danny says I'm the one next to Brian with a long beard. Yeah, there's the bald guy with the long beard.
That's Danny.
This is what I would look like if I just became like a prepper, and I stopped shaving.
Are you not a prepper now?
I'm not. I wish. Part of me wants to be a prepper, but I'm just not there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so all racism aside, Brian.
Sure.
Do you
I mean,
feel
the
like
value is a good value.
looking at that enormous bag of minis for $100,
You get 50
$2 a
minis,
pop,
yeah.
you get 50 modern day minis in a variety of poses.
I guess the other problem is I don't play a lot of modern games, so it doesn't come up a lot for me.
Maybe. Yes. Maybe.
But maybe like maybe there's a reason there aren't a ton of like modern minis.
Yeah.
Like there aren't a bunch of I don't know.
I'm telling you right now, there's a little tiny part of me that wants to go all in on this, and
watch your wife file for divorce.
no, because listen, here's what I'm going to aim at. I'm going to say this could be my birthday present / Christmas present. See, thinking birthday / growth,
Okay.
and it helps
You're
a good
gonna
cause.
waste a birthday / Christmas present on a $100 Kickstarter? That's 2 presents.
Well, that's what I mean. Like that's it'd be worth it. All right. Time to move out of Kickstarters, people, and into table topics. Hashtag table topics. So if you're live and you're following us right now, go ahead and add in your 2 cents in the chat. But if you're watching this later, then enjoy. So, Brian, first table topic is, because it's so close to Halloween,
2 days away.
let's talk about adding horror elements to any game. So we'll start off with D&D.
Okay.
In the Dungeon Master's Guide, Brian, there are parts about insanity.
Insanity, madness.
Yes. Now, where do you think they got that from?
My guess is a different game.
That'd be my
I
guess.
know they
too.
got downtime from World of Darkness, so
Dark fantasy. So if
Yeah.
you're following along in your DM's guide on page, there are all these
40.
different kind of flavors of fantasy. Yeah. So page 40 has dark fantasy,
mystery could be part of that whole horror genre. Also,
intrigue, mystery.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what Wuxia is, but
It's kind of the Asian
inspired.
Yeah, Oriental Adventures for those of you from the AD&D world.
Right. The unapproachable beast and whatnot.
Yes. Oh, Feywild. So
Sure.
let's talk about that.
Okay.
So how do you take the Feywild and what's the opposite of the Feywild? The dark. something.
It's still the Feywild.
Oh,
It's
there's the
just
Seelie and the
Seelie and
Unseelie.
Unseelie,
Okay,
yeah.
so how do you take those elements and make them part of your game? You're doing this already in the Bard's Tale.
Sure.
I'm not as familiar with this component, but how do you do that and add in a little bit of the scary kind of supernatural horror
Well,
element?
fortunately, Feywild, pixies, fairies, and satyrs are already terrifying if you read the old mythology, right?
You know what's
Like, you don't
terrifying
have
are
to-
red caps.
Yeah,
I'm
they're spooky.
I want to hold the back of my head. They're scary.
Yeah.
Like they just eat the whole things.
Yeah, they're
like
spooky.
bones and everything.
Yeah. The notion of the Fae is not a pleasant note. Like, I think Disney has done a disservice to a lot of people by introducing them to the notion of like happy,
Yeah.
pleasant fairies. In the same way that Coca-Cola has done a disservice to people by introducing them to happy, pleasant polar bears.
Yes.
They're not like
Yeah.
they're not that.
Yeah. All right.
Fairies
Gi-
come from a mythology where they're troublesome and they're tricksy and.
Let's
cause
think of a
pain.
couple things.
Yeah.
What's a good horror movie that people might know that draws a little bit from this?
What's that?
Leprechaun.
Leprechaun for sure. I
That's
mean,
cheesy, but
that's
I mean,
real
still.
cheesy. What's that? It's a Spanish movie by Del Toro.
Yeah. Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth is for sure one.
You know what's funny? I've never seen that, and I'm an idiot because everybody's like, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
a visual effects masterpiece, and all I could think of is the guy that puts his hand up and there's an eyeball in his
Right.
hand. But okay, so
Yeah, Pan's Labyrinth is an example.
I mean, the whole Peter Pan thing.
Yeah, so
is-
that's terrifying. Like, if you think about it, it's a dude who flies into your children's windows and kidnaps them
Right.
forever.
Right,
Like-
and isn't there also
There's some
aren't there a few
molestation.
interpretations of Peter Pan's kind of vibe that are a little darker like that? Can
I mean,
can
like,
we
the notion
implement
of,
those
like-
in our games and D&D, that kind of stuff?
Yes, I mean you can implement whatever you want in your games of D&D, right?
Right.
That's the benefit of D&D. I think there's plenty to be found in traditional stories in general.
Yeah,
I think like you go through Grimm fairy tales and you can see 1,000 examples of what you could do to spook up your fantasy game, your
Right.
light fantasy game.
right.
And I think it's not hard to do. I think you just once you understand. What I will say is read mythology. Read where the stories come from. Don't read the American interpretations of them, right? So don't watch a Disney movie expecting that to be the story of the Little Mermaid. You know what I mean?
Right.
Go back to the original.
Like Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's spooky. Like it's spooky stuff that have been kind of watered down as traditional stories to be more kid friendly and more accessible.
Okay, on that thread, since we're vibing in that direction, what the essence of Halloween is, right, is All Hallows Eve, like the night before
Sure.
All Saints Day,
Yeah, you scare away spirits.
is the nasty spirits want to come and get you. So let's figure out a role-playing game equivalent. Is there a way to set up like a holiday in your D&D game or in whatever game you're playing that people firmly believe in, and for whatever metaphysical or divine reason the gods are not as strong the night before this sacred day for whatever mythological reason, and so that opens up opportunities where the veil is thinner and the spirits and the blah 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 can get through,
I
right?
mean, yes, I think you just did, right? Like you have to come up with the reason why the gods are weaker,
Right.
In my setting, the gods are non-existent, so like that's not
Shadowfell.
great- The Shadowfell. Sure.
Tell me about the Shadowfell.
So the Shadowfell is largely in other games, right? In the World of Darkness games, the Shadowfell is like where the dead are,
Right.
And I don't know if 5th edition changed it to because the 5th edition it used to be the plane of shadow.
Yeah.
So my guess is they've changed that to the Shadowfell.
Okay.
But it's like a inverted, spooky, shadowy version of reality where the dead are.
Okay.
Right? So yeah, that's pretty spooky. Like if you want to add a horror aspect to your game,
Ooh, So Irony Golem says, Children of the Corn is a play on the fact that druids were a human sacrifice cult. They killed people in their Burning Man sacrifice and in bogs. Halloween is not anti-druids. That is the druids. Okay, let's break that down.
Sure.
Children of the Corn. So maybe the idea of adding some horror is your party of adventurers in D&D comes to some like normal seeming village, right? Your typical D&D-ish village.
Almost too normal.
Yeah, like farmers and just, friendly peasant folk and stuff. But then at night, the first night that they're staying at the inn, they hear something happening and they go investigate it. And just out in the middle of a nearby field is this weird ritualistic thing, and they find a body, but no one else around, right? Sure. And then they start investigating, and maybe they find out that this town has this weird ritual that they do every year, this series of rituals that they do every year. And it seems really sinister and evil and horrible, and you're like, why would these nice people do this stuff? And maybe you find out that there's a reason, because they're
keeping a monster.
They're keeping a monster at bay, or they're being extorted.
A cabin in the woods approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another great thing.
And like the thing is, like, there's so many horror tropes that you can kind of like lean into. I think the trick is to lean into those horror tropes without making them feel like you're just ripping off those horror tropes.
Right.
Right. Like the notion of Children of the Corn is these children murder you if you're not invited to eat the corn, and you eat the corn. Right, yes. Like the corn tells them to kill you because it's been somehow abused.
Right.
Right. Like, I think there's something there that you can use without being like, oh, this is a Children of the Corn paradigm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
well, Irony Golem just shared the something that reminded me as well. He says that the old play The Lottery, where the farming community draws lots to sacrifice someone to the agricultural god. Yeah. And it's not. It also messes with alignment too.
Book?
It also messes with alignment too, right? Because, what might seem initially evil, you might find out is not in fact evil. It's people, well, it is evil regardless, but people, their motivation for why they do it.
It's less evil than the alternative.
Right.
Yeah.
You find out that this is something that they...
And I think any good game is going to, like, regardless of adding Halloween or not, any good game is going to kind of challenge those clear-cut notions of alignment anyway.
Yes.
Right? Like, we're getting into that a little bit in the Bard's Tale, and if you stay tuned for Season 3, you'll see some of that going on. Maybe you've already seen some in Season 2, but largely, I think you can make a game more Halloween horror-esque by having Halloween and horror in mind when you build the game, like...
Right.
If you want to do a spooky week, like, up the stakes, I think it's terrifying when it's tough because you don't want to be inconsistent, right? But, like, if you up the stakes and you're like, oh, you died, like, you're dead now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's an interesting thing, because if you're not normally playing with the gloves off, all of a sudden, like, when the tone is different, your party's going to take that differently.
Yes.
Right? All of a sudden, when the stakes are higher, there's going to be more suspense involved.
Well, let's talk about maybe a couple relatively well-known examples from D&D, right? So, zombies. Sure. Zombies are such a common monster that they're in the back of the player's handbook, along with, like, animals, right? They're not even...
Well, it's because you can summon them with necromancy spells, and, like, you have access to that.
But point being is, like, if you as a DM just use zombies as, like, a monster, like, all right, you're attacked by zombies, there's nothing inherently horror or horrible or scary about that.
I mean, they're a horror trope, but they're kind of a boring one.
But I feel like if you put a little extra effort into the narrative part of it, it could be. Mm-hmm. So in other words, maybe instead of just throwing zombies, like, maybe have the party interact and meet with and interact, like, with some NPCs from this place that they're at, right? And maybe even build some kind of a friendship or camaraderie. Sure. And then, one of them gets, like, slips and falls down this weird trap tunnel, and they're like, oh, man, and you hear the screams, and then they don't find him. But then later on in the dungeon or in the town or wherever they're at, they see this friend, and the friend is returned, but it's a zombie now, and it's maybe they don't initially know that it's a zombie, but the friend comes back, and then they find other people that have been affected by this or infected or whatever it is. Another example, like in Curse of Strahd, and I don't know if this would be a spoiler or not, but we won't name anyone specific.
The book's been out for 4 years.
Okay, so in Curse of Strahd, though, there are NPCs who get turned, right?
Yeah.
So if the players actually interacted with these NPCs and spent a lot of time with them, only to have them lost to the darkness, as they have been now turned into vampires, like that can have really strong kind of dark elements to it.
And I think like they don't have to be a lot, like you can have an NPC that has seemed pretty like good aligned for the course of a game that you suddenly realize what their motivations are, right? Like the notion of like, I think about liches, right? These timeless monsters that don't die and have eternity to implement their plans, right?
Yeah.
At some point, the long game is going to say that they're going to work with a group of heroic party members to accomplish some task.
Right.
Right? And then if you find out that
or manipulate that party.
Well, maybe, but if you find out that task is in service to a greater evil thing, right? I think like that's a pretty horror related thing. Like I think the warlock class in general is built for horror settings, right?
Yeah.
Like the notion of literally making deals with devils.
Like page 95 here under villains, there's a whole bunch of tables in the DM's guide. But like if you look at the hauntings, illusions, infernal bargains, like you said, raising or animated the dead. But there are a lot of different options. Burying alive,
right?
So maybe you're right. Maybe it's not just a matter of killing people, but like the potential for horror.
Right. And I think like the other thing to consider is if you're doing a themed game based off Halloween, Halloween is not just about horror. It's also about autumn and harvest and all of these other aspects that you can incorporate to give it a more I think when you do a game like this, the goal is to get people more invested in that game by presenting them something that they can relate to at a meta level, right? Like it's Halloween time, we're doing a spooky story so you can get excited about Halloween time, right?
Yes.
But like I think if you're dealing with like a harvest blight or maybe there's scarecrows that have become sentient and are attacking, right? Like all of these things lead to a general feel of autumn and dread in ways that aren't necessarily outright horror, right?
Like, well, like, and even,
it's not all slasher films.
In the chat, like Irony Allan mentioned the Bible and Cain and that kind of element. So tying it back, like you said, to the seasonal components of it could be beneficial. What I'm looking for now is Madness 258 to 260.
Yeah. Some optional rules next to grueling adventures.
So Madness.
Madness.
So on 258, 259 to 60, there's long-term madness, indefinite madness, short-term madness. So that's very much to me when I saw this, I was like, oh, good. They're drawing from Call of Cthulhu.
Sure.
Because that's a huge element in like Lovecraft's writing, and then that was implemented in all the early editions of Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu, was the idea of sanity loss. And based on how much sanity you lost, there would be effects, short-term, long-term, indefinitely, etc., right? If you want to add in elements of horror, that's one way to add it in, because you can mess with the players. If they aren't sure...
You mess with the players and you mess with their agency?
Yeah. If they're not sure what is
but
real
you do
and what
it in
isn't.
Mechanical ways, right? Like, there's a difference between messing with a player's agency and being like, oh, you don't know, and messing with the player's agency and saying like, oh, you're insane. Like, make a check.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Which I think is the if you're going to use these madness tables, there has to be a narrative reason. Otherwise, it's going to feel like being abusive.
Right. So, well, you know this from the player perspective, but in the Handyman campaign, there's interacting with certain divine objects that are inherently evil can result in effects, right? And actually, I think that and this is I'm using this World of Darkness as an example. So this is an older White Wolf World of Darkness book, but all of them have had editions where there are derangements, right? And they have different descriptions, many of which overlap here. You know,
Sure.
so fixation, suspicion, irrationality, megalomania, paranoia, anxiety, schizophrenia, all these different
Even like
things.
melancholia, right?
Yeah.
Like being depressed and useless.
Yes.
Right? You know, like, and I don't mean that in like a negative way to people who are depressed. I mean like you're depressed to the point that you can't function.
Right.
Like that's pretty spooky.
Right.
Like,
and it's, you know, it's not meant to take your character out of play permanently. It's not death. So I think two things. Number one, adding in whatever these different horror elements that are narrative, or horror elements that maybe have to do with madness, insanity, derangements, that kind of stuff, can add in narrative elements for your players' challenges, basically, to overcome, that are more than just roll dice to kill something.
and there's the old trope that like the least interesting thing you can do to a character is kill them.
Yeah.
Right? The least terrifying thing you can do to a player is kill off their character. Like,
Yeah.
I think play with that. If you're trying to run a horror-based adventure, like, find those more terrifying things.
Right. Not
Like-
being certain about what is real and what isn't
Right.
real. Like, those are all things that could be part of it. Absolutely.
I might do a labyrinth. Like Labyrinth, are,
where they can't escape.
where they have to like solve puzzles and they have like things are bearing down on them.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I think Danny mentioned Mirror Mask in terms of like
Yeah, that was back in the
cool
chat a minute
Fae
ago.
movies.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's it's a Jim Henson movie. It's commonly sold with Labyrinth actually and Dark Crystal. And it's very like Labyrinth-esque in terms of like there's like a confusing situation that you just have to watch the character go through, and it's very surrealist and that kind of thing. But there's like monsters involved, as you would expect from a Jim Henson movie. But yeah, I might even play with. Yeah, it's a really good inspiration for Invisible Sun. It's also just a good movie. I might play with weather, right? I might play with things that aren't typically, that are often overlooked.
Describing, you mean as a DM, describing those elements in more detail than you normally would? To give you,
I mean, I think it's
set
something.
the scene,
I
to
think
make
it's something
things
that I
more...
should do anyway. I just am bad at it.
Right, but
but like
I'm the same
it
way.
might be a good time. Like Halloween might be the good time to like start working. Like people just need reasons to start doing things.
Yeah.
Right? Like they need to justify like, oh, now's the time to start that because such and such. And if like running a game Halloween week is the reason that you need to tell yourself to start that whole process, cool, do it. I think weather is overlooked in D&D. I don't think it comes up nearly enough in combats.
Yeah.
I think there are major challenges to overcoming strong winds, right? Like,
Sure.
You get disadvantage on all ranged attack rolls because there's strong winds.
Well, hearing
Like,
stuff.
yeah.
Perception checks. I mean, like, so, you know, in a real concrete example, like if the wind is really strong enough, you won't hear somebody 60
Right.
feet away.
Right.
And you could say, you know, everybody makes a perception check and somebody rolls some incredibly high thing, and you could describe it in a sense that is a little bit mysterious and horror oriented, where, you know, you're not sure if it's the whistling of the wind,
Right.
or your mind losing its grip on reality, but you feel like you hear screams from afar, whatever.
And
right?
I think
You know?
that's the key to these horror elements is like any game is a horror game if you describe it like a horror game.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's about DM description and player description to some degree as well. But that's the key, right? Like it's
Yeah.
all about the descriptions that you put into it, not necessarily the rules you use to pull out.
Yeah. I would, I think that's, and that's it. I mean, and you're right.
Giant weather, they come down and march about.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Like you could have giants. Exactly. Giants, it doesn't take a lot of giants to create horror, but if you have, you know, the right combination of them, it could be terrifying, you know. And also, I think, again, this kind of goes back to utilizing monsters in a creative way. You know, throwing some monsters at somebody, everybody roll initiative, roll to hit, that kind of stuff, versus describing the entrance of the monster or describing how they discover the monster, I think can be really, really huge. So, all right, we're going to do upcoming conventions.
Okay.
Because when is GameHole Con?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So what is GameHole Con and when is it? And tell us about it.
GameHole Con is a D&D convention in... I don't know if it's D&D or just tabletop gaming. But it's in Madison, Wisconsin. 2 weeks from yesterday it ends. So not this coming weekend, the weekend after.
Okay, so the weekend of the 9th, 10th, 11th?
It's like the 7th through the 10th.
Oh, so that Thursday or whatever, Wednesday or Thursday through the Sunday.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
But yeah, it's a pretty cool event from my understanding. There's a big AL contingent. It's where a lot of the Adventures League Season 8 stuff is going live, so that's where like the Epic's going to go live, I think. But yeah, it should be a good time. We're going to go just an overnight, I think. We're actually shooting a session 0 for the next show at noon on that Sunday, so we'll have to come back early on Sunday. But yeah.
Cool.
It should be a cool event. I know that like Satine and Rudy from Maze Arcana are going to be there. Some other folks from Maze Arcana are going to be there. Tyler Curtis, who does a lot of photography for that whole LA crew, who's a Chicago native.
See?
And then I'm not sure like what West Coast people come out for it. I know that Shelly Mazzanoble will be there from Avalon Games, who co-hosts Dragon Talk.
Oh, yeah.
And there was talk that Greg Tito was going to try to make it out, but he wasn't sure.
Cool.
My understanding is it's a little bit more family friendly than some of the other cons, because there's like
not as huge as Gen Con.
It's definitely smaller than Gen Con and Yeri Con, but there's also just like they focus on like having activities available for kids.
Nice.
But I've not been there, so I don't know that.
I feel like that's a crucial thing because as a parent, like I couldn't enjoy gaming if I knew that my kids were just running around unsupervised.
I mean, and that's why LionCon was so successful last year, is we made an effort to focus on games for kids too.
Yeah.
So
for sure. All right. Well, as we approach the end of the show, Brian, it's time for Monster Monday. Brian, we've been drawing from the Monster Manual.
Let's do a different book.
Close your eyes.
You've only got one other book.
I only have one other book
Here.
That's because you need to bring your book next time.
Oh, all right.
All right. Here we go. I will start the flip in 3, 2, 1.
Stop.
I don't even know what this is.
Structured Society.
Oh, God.
Yuan-Ti?
Oh, God. The Yuan-Ti. This isn't fair.
This is no, we got to redo it because this is like the description chapter.
Oh, sorry.
It's not like the monster chapter.
All right. You do the flip. Go. Nope. I was too long in my running.
Oh, I still got Yuan-Ti.
God. Yuan-Ti. All right, on one page we have the Mind Whisperer, and then we have the Nightmare Speaker.
I'm ready. If you want to see what I would do with a Yuan-Ti,
You dick.
you should watch The Bard's Tale. Because Season 2 has a lot of it, especially the finale. Go watch The Bard's Tale.
Okay, I'm going to go with the Nightmare Speaker.
Okay.
So I imagine that she is not just torturing because she's evil, but she's torturing a group of adventurers, including so you got like the party of PCs, but then you've got a bunch of other NPCs. Like imagine just a whole warehouse, right? And each one of them are, instead of being in cells, they're chained, and but their chain can slide up and down this long like post. You know what I mean? So they can move back and forth, and they can like interact with each other. But she takes one by one. She'll take one into an adjacent torture chamber, and she's torturing. None of the players know why she's torturing them. Like they all know as they talk amongst themselves while they're waiting to be tortured that like she keeps taking people in there to torture them, and they never come back out. They never come back out. And well, why? What do you? And then if the players start to interact with the other NPCs, they can start to figure out that she's actually looking for something. She's actually torturing them for information. She's interrogating them and torturing them. And anyone who doesn't give her the information that she wants ends up not coming back out because they're dead, right? So this goes on. Drag it out. Actually, this is a nice way to add in the horror element, right? And it's maybe you, as a DM, you have a bunch of straws and you make the players choose, and finally somebody picks the short straw, and then they have to go in, right? And then you sidebar that, and then that player comes back out, but they look very different, right? They now have some short-term madness effect, and they're unable to articulate what happened. So everybody else is like, dude, what? He came back out. Like, right. No one's ever come back out. Why? What did you tell her? And the guy can't talk. The player has to role play that he can't talk for X amount of time, right? Sure. So now they're trying to figure out, like, what it is that she wants to know. Why is she, torturing these people? What it is that she wants to know. And the DM maybe ties this into some bigger thing, like maybe the players uncovered some dumb little thing way back when 20 adventures ago that they forgot about, and it ends up being really important to this Yuan-Ti cult. That's all.
I like it.
All right, so
there's a lot of chat here last minute here.
So we'll just say
I actually have a thing that I might be doing tonight. I might be joining Mini Terrain Domain for a one-shot based off the Krifoth Kickstarted materials from Dice on Ice.
Nice.
That is if... it probably won't be that because the DM got sick, but we might do a different one-shot instead.
Okay.
It's largely up to the guy to Jake.
On Twitch or YouTube?
He's on both. He multicasts.
All right. So if you're interested in finding out where Brian's at tonight, follow him on Twitter if you don't already. Go to the Initiative Coffee Company, social media, and all that stuff. Thank you.
Thanks everybody
for joining in chat. It's I know we didn't get quite enough time to read through everything here, but
when does season 3 of D&D with high school drop?
Season 3 of D&D with high school students started last Friday. So we'll have a new episode every Friday at noon Central Standard Time.
That's cool.
It is just a hot mess as these brand new newbies try to learn basic interaction and humanity.
Sure.
They're not murder hobos yet, Brian, but
they'll get there.
They're working their way there.
And then I guess the other thing is we're launching the new show Long Rest.
Yes.
November 10th.
Yes.
From our tiny home studio in the basement.
That's right.
Long Rest, we're going to start with the Monster of the Week system and then probably go off the rails from there. We'll do a session 0, kind of go over the game and the setting and kind of what rules we're going to use. And then the first regular episode of it will be in December.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
so check that out.
Thanks for tuning in to Rise and Roll today.
Indeed.
Have a great Halloween.
Yeah.
And make sure that you always roll dice and
roll together.
Roll together
with other people,
with other humans, if possible.
Hey neighbors, thanks for watching our video. Make sure you check out our other videos here and here. Make sure you subscribe down there and get the notifications from the bell up there. See you next time.